He drew his hand back slowly, almost reluctantly, like someone waking from a vivid dream they didn't want to leave. The moment lingered in the air, suspended between what was and what could have been. I stayed perfectly still, my breath shallow but steady, the warmth of his touch still echoing faintly on my skin like a whisper that refused to fade. The air between us felt charged, fragile, uncertain, yet alive with something neither of us dared to name. Even the faint hum of the world outside seemed to hush itself, as if giving space to the quiet tension pulsing between us. My robe hung loosely around me, one sleeve slipping from my shoulder, but I didn't move to fix it. Movement felt like it would break whatever spell we had accidentally cast. I wanted that stillness to last a little longer, just long enough for me to memorize the way the air felt, the way my pulse thrummed softly in my ears. Sometimes silence holds more than words ever could. It fills the room with meaning that can't be spoken aloud. Some moments carve themselves so deeply into memory that even years later, they live just beneath the skin. Silence becomes unbearable because it demands to be told, to be released, to find form again. That's why I'm sharing this story, not because I want to, but because I have to. Even now, I can feel the weight of that evening, not on my body, but in the quiet corners of who I am. It had started as something simple, almost innocent, a small act of care, a kindness wrapped in routine. At least that's what I told myself and him. But deep down, I knew better. It was more than care. It was recognition, a wordless offering, an unspoken confession I didn't yet have the courage to name. The towel was already draped in place when I stepped back, its soft folds catching the low amber light that spilled gently across the room. The faint scent of eucalyptus and something floral lingered, weaving through the air like a quiet reassurance. The sound of slow, steady breathing filled the silence, his, calm but weighted. I adjusted the towel slightly near his shoulder, smoothing a crease with the edge of my fingers. "Just breathe," I whispered, my voice barely more than air. "I'll be right here." He smiled softly, eyes still closed, the corners of his mouth lifting in quiet gratitude. He always appreciated the little gestures, the ones that required no explanation, no grand effort, the kind that came from noticing. I watched his chest rise and fall, the rhythm of someone finally beginning to let go. For a fleeting moment, I thought that might be enough, but then she entered. She moved with an ease that immediately shifted the atmosphere. Her steps were measured, her presence grounded. Her hair was twisted neatly at the nape of her neck, not a strand out of place, and her composure filled the space with a subtle confidence. She nodded once toward me, acknowledging my unspoken instructions, then turned her full attention to him. Her hands, light yet sure, rested on his shoulders as she began to work. The movement was slow, methodical, deliberate. There was strength in her gentleness, a quiet authority that didn't demand trust. It simply created it. I could see the tension leaving his body, unraveling piece by piece beneath her touch. Sitting in the dim light, I felt like a spectator to something sacred, something deeply human. He thought I had left him alone to his calm. He didn't know I was still there watching, feeling, holding my silence like a secret. Her movements flowed with a rhythm that felt almost choreographed, each shift of her stance and sweep of her palms measured and graceful. It was like watching a language unfold, one made entirely of touch, breath, and intention. She pressed her hands slowly along the curve of his shoulders, her motions deliberate but tender. The way she leaned in, the way she exhaled when she moved, created a kind of quiet music in the air. The room itself seemed to respond, softening around them, the faint flicker of candlelight bending in time with her motions. He released a long breath, the kind that comes only when the body begins to forget how to resist. I could see his shoulders sink, the last traces of tension fading like mist. Then, a small shift, his hand twitched, just slightly, a barely visible motion. It was subtle enough to be overlooked, but I noticed. Maybe it was reflex, or maybe something else, something stirring beneath the calm surface. She paused, sensing it too, her head tilting just a little. I always said I had steadier hands. She murmured softly, her tone playful but quiet, more to herself than to him. He didn't open his eyes, but a faint smile appeared, so small it almost wasn't there. There was something in the air between them, familiarity, maybe recognition. The crease that formed between his brows wasn't confusion. It was awareness returning, the kind that comes when the soul begins to wake before the mind does. I leaned forward slightly, resting my chin in my palm, unable to look away. His body was responding, not in fear or resistance, but with gentle curiosity. And though her motions remained the same, something had changed. The silence around them had taken on a pulse's shared heartbeat neither seemed aware of yet. When I finally stood, the faint rustle of fabric was the only sound that marked my movement. She noticed first, her eyes flicked toward me for just a second, quick and deliberate, like a silent acknowledgement that the moment had shifted. I walked slowly to the ottoman beside him and sat down, close enough that he could sense my presence, but still just beyond his direct sight. My hand hesitated for a fraction of a breath before I reached out and rested it gently on his arm. His skin was warm beneath my fingertips, his pulse steady but faintly quickened. His breath caught, and his eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, drifting before they finally found mine. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. In that look was the dawning realization that I had never left, that I had been there all along, watching, guiding, orchestrating something he didn't yet fully understand. The air in the room thickened, charged with a quiet electricity that neither of us dared to disturb. She continued her work, her voice low and steady, calm and steady. She murmured under her breath, her focus unbroken. The towel stayed perfectly in place, her hands composed and sure. She moved with the same rhythmic precision, but the silence carried new weight now. When her eyes met mine again, there was a silent question there. Do we keep going? I gave a small nod. That was all the answer she needed. He shifted slightly, uncertain but trusting, still piecing together what this all meant. Still comfortable? She asked softly, her tone a blend of professionalism and warmth. He nodded, voice barely audible. Yes, I'm fine. She smiled faintly, returning to her slow, steady rhythm. I kept my hand on his arm, grounding him. The gesture spoke louder than any words I could have offered. Something unspoken passed between us, an invisible thread pulling gently at the air. It was fragile, yet undeniable. The kind of awareness that doesn't need to be explained because it's already understood. When he looked at me again, his gaze was softer, the confusion gone, replaced by something far more vulnerable. She paused briefly, her eyes lifting to meet mine. You sure? She asked quietly, her voice steady but gentle, seeking permission more than confirmation. I nodded once. Yes, I said, surprising myself with the calm certainty in my voice. This is for him. He needs to learn how to let go. He turned his head slightly toward me, as if drawn by something beyond reason, his expression open yet unsure. The realization dawned on him slowly. It wasn't about the act itself, but what it represented. I had seen him carry so much for so long, the weight of unspoken burdens, the quiet fatigue that never found rest. And in this room, beneath the soft glow of light and the rhythmic motion of her hands, he was finally being allowed to stop pretending he was fine. The silence deepened, not empty, but full of breath, trust, release. Her movements grew slower, more meditative, a rhythm of reassurance. It wasn't touch anymore. It was permission. Permission to rest, to exist without expectation, to remember what peace felt like. I stayed beside him, my hand still resting lightly on his forearm. The world outside faded into gray twilight, the golden edges of daylight softening into evening calm. When she finished, even the air seemed to settle with her. He opened his eyes, clearer now, grounded. Better, I whispered. He smiled faintly. Better. And in that silence, his hand finding mine, I realized peace doesn't always arrive with words. Sometimes it just stays.